Hello, I'm Tyler Edlin with 3dbuzz.com, and in this course on 2D character design, I will show before I get to the final illustration, I'd like to just give a little video on how I came up with the final pose. Alright, so figure drawing is, or gesture drawing even, is really difficult, so I'll try my best to explain this, what I'm going for, and I do have a reference. But I'd like to stick with a few different shapes, and that could be like S curves, C curves, and then like straight lines. And I just connected using the shoulders to connect that C curve and kind of coming down this initial, and then and then in another C curve. But the goal ultimately is to get the general gesture down, no matter how accurate or not, within a minute or so. You can always go back and correct it later. And I end up doing a lot of that. And this is definitely over-exaggerated, and I find that's very helpful because once you start to add the forms, like when you start correcting it and drawing over, you lose a little bit of that every time, and when you do that, it ultimately makes it more stiff. So if you're not over-exaggerated and you're going out and you're correcting the pose, then you'll just end up with something that's very stiff from the get-go. And this is something I'm kind of been trying to practice on a regular basis now, because it is a very tough discipline. Ultimately, I do change up that hand quite a bit, so I'm not exactly sure what that. When you start changing the hands, the pose will start saying many different things. And this is what I was talking about by going back to the initial gesture and adding the anatomy to it. And you want to design the details to complement the gesture, and having the gesture tell the story by capturing the body language is kind of the top priority. You just want to ask yourself, what is the character doing or feeling? And I did ask myself that, and I was ultimately a little unsure at this stage. And then I'll end up painting her shooting kind of like an energy blast. But is it one of she casting like a healing magic or some type of just a powerful spell? But she's feeling a little reluctant about doing so. Like not even she herself is entirely positive outcome will be of by casting this magic. So she definitely looks a little hesitant. But generally, it's the I do gotta say, it's the longest axis of each form where you'll find the fluid motion, and that will go from one form to the next. So by the length of the legs, the arms, or the torso, and you want to get that in as fluid of a motion as possible. Just suggest some little fingers, and I'll ultimately go back and shoot my own hand reference for that later on, but I'm still trying to explore what this pose is all about. So I drop what is that, a plumb line? That might be called a plumb line. I'm sorry, I'm not sure. I should look that up, but if you have that basically rest underneath the head, that's where and going straight down, that's where the center of balance on the character will be. And so the legs have to support that. You're just repositioning the head. See, I'm trying to use as few lines as possible to kind of figure this out and make the shoulders smaller so she's not all jacked up like in the old drawing you saw me do. But I'm definitely not liking that hand. Yeah, see, I used kind of one fluid mind, has a slight bit of foreshortening there. So basically I'm just going to pipe it out and try to draw it as a cylinder and get the correct amount of overlapping. And this is on a new layer in case I totally mess it up. See, it just takes a few passes to get something like this right. I definitely don't do it my first try. When exploring things like this, I try to think of everything as either kind of blocks or cylinders. Fingers as cylinders, the palms a block, the arms, the forearm and bicep also cylinders. Just simple geometric shapes to help you visualize the form. If you have one of those art mannequins, it definitely helps when it comes to this. One thing to remember is don't get discouraged if you've had many bad drawings. And I get bad gesture drawings all the time. In fact, it was just the other day I just burned. I threw all of them on my father's furnace from art school. Just so many bad ones. Not that this one's even great, but I'm just trying to make it not come off as stiff at this point. Trying to refine some of that lineup, so it definitely helps to, figure out the center of the head and get whatever is symmetrical regarding the face right. But the face takes me several passes. Just was not happy with how it was coming out for a while. So I do it on my own layer and try to resolve that right here. I think the face is just a little bit too fat, yeah. Smooth that in, that helped a lot. Of course, knowing your character's age really helps at this stage as well. I mean, I'm going to go for one of those typical, maybe like early 20s or late teens type of females. Typical in one of those role-playing games. Rendering out like this is not entirely necessary at this point, if not at all. I'm just going to do it to kind of get some peace within myself, and I'll feel better if I just resolve a little bit of these forms by doing kind of like a traditional drawing approach on it to kind of figure out where things are. I do want the shapes of the face to come off relatively soft, so that's why I'm using the airbrush. When you get an airbrush, there's no hard edges unless you delete into it or erase into it with a harder edged brush. Kind of like what I just did there to indicate light on the ridge of the nose. So if I draw this out at kind of like this level right here, then I can kind of just paint over it and use this as an underpainting when I'm going to be in the final character sketch, because the faces are always the hardest for me and one of the first things I do try to capture. Drawing faces like this definitely takes all of my focus when I'm doing it. And, I have to go to my second monitor, shut off the Netflix, even put on more peaceful or relaxing music. I just have such a difficult time with faces, and kind of blasting some of the faster, higher paced tempo stuff really just distracts me. Sorry if you heard that. The window's open here. I don't have an air conditioner, and we have like 80% humidity today. I'm just dying here over the screen. Ugh. This won't be the absolute lighting, for the end drawing, but I'm just trying to depict the form. Then I can kind of paint the light on top of this later. I definitely over detail this for this stage, and this isn't even how I work every single time, but I just wanted to kind of give you guys, show you a workflow that does work if you commit the time to it. I guess part of being an artist is always trying to develop an optimal workflow for you, what you're comfortable with and what ultimately saves you the most time. I didn't take the most direct approach to designing this character. but I felt I worked out a lot of my design issues I had, and I'm definitely getting more confident in the direction I'm heading with her. Sometimes the best thing to do is just complete the character, send it to your closest circle of friends, get some general feedback, and then just let it sit for like a week or two. Revisit it if you have the time, if it's for yourself. And I go back again on a new layer and trying to just explore that final shape of the hair. I'm ultimately not going to be designing the outfit at this. That's going to be all in the final video, which I think is going to be an hour and a half, and I'll split that into 3 segments. But this is just about the gesture, basically, and of course the face and the flow of the hair will go with that as well. And I think I do like going with the more messy hair on this. I think it adds to like the mystery of her. Give it the sense that she is, powerful and even well-traveled from a far place. And yeah, you just don't know what she's capable of. Definitely not like the look of a typical shrine maiden or princess-ish type of character, so I might have to work part of the character design in other places to kind of root back to that. Not looking a little bit too Japanese manga-ish, but that'll come down to rendering. It's not like this will be a flat line drawing and coloring job, so definitely when I paint this up, that'll add a lot of myself into it. So, and I'm just gonna etch out the general shape of this curve here, not the entire outfit, because most of it will be skin tight. But I'm definitely avoiding the let's just have a young girl with a huge chest and very little armor, or another really bad stereotype that always kind of grinds my gears is the chick wearing just like a G-string and it has like 300-pound heavy miniguns on her and stuff like that. That's just, what is that saying? What is her story? That's just something you're drawing for the sake of drawing it. I definitely try to give all my work a little bit more of a purpose, and by the end I hope it will just have a little heart and soul in it, not just be some generic pin-up image. So I have the major shapes blocked out anyway on the costume, and then I'll kind of work within them when I'm rendering and figuring out how to draw the materials in the next part of the illustration. And if you've already designed a background for your character, you can have that in mind when composing the final image. But it's all up to you. This is just kind of be like a overly rendered character sheet that might look okay in a book. That's why I'm doing it the way I am. It's not going to be some action illustration where you'd see it on the cover of a novel or something like that. No, it's not going to be that type of illustration. So it's good to know your intent and purposes and basically state your goals before, if you're not aware of them, before you work on any piece. Because, how can you get somewhere you haven't been yet without like a map or something like that? It's just always good to have a solid direction or purpose in mind. Your work will look more meaningful for it, trust me. So if you have been watching the whole video series up to this point and even got a little bored, I apologize, but I just wanted to be as thorough as I could. And you could ultimately just head skip to the last segment where I work on the final illustration if you wanted to kind of skip all the lectures on the design how-tos and whatnot. So we're about to begin it. Get ready. Just going to tone this up here and more or less ready to move on now.